Hey there. Welcome back to Empathetic Presence. I'm Lee. I am so excited to share my conversation today with Sehreen Noor Ali. Sehreen runs Te Cura Labs, where she helps leaders think about strategic visibility. My friend Sehreen has always changed the way I see the world. Anytime I sit down with her, I leave completely shifted. And it's because she sees the world with both curiosity and empathy. This conversation with Sehreen shifted the way I think about the word visionary. Sehreen talks about how more of us are visionary than we might believe. And she talks about influence as this combination of inner clarity with external resonance, which makes the word so much more tangible than I've ever heard before. I especially loved our conversation about the difference between those of us who are agitators and disruptors or diplomats, and how we have to own our own style in order to move through change moments in our world. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Sehreen Noor Ali just as much as I did. Enjoy! One of my favorite human beings, Sehreen Noor Ali. Hello.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm always excited to talk to you. And I'm really excited for our listeners to hear what you've been up to because everything you've worked on since I've known you has been incredibly aligned and impactful. And why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you use your voice, Sehreen?
Yeah, I would love to. I have realized that stories have no beginning and end. So my most recent story where I've used my voice is transitioning from a venture-backed founder of a pediatric AI startup called Sleuth and moving into a business serving people whose voice I want to see in the world. And my voice in that process has been primarily as an advocate. I think that is how I've used my voice most of my life, usually for others, and particularly for my children, which, and for other children, not just my children, when I started Sleuth. And now I'm starting to use my voice for myself and applying what I learn to empower other people to use the voice that they have.
Helping people bring their voice in the world, and the way that you've done that with medical needs parents and kids, the way that you have done that as an advocate, as a human being in every community space I've been with you in. And now you're working with founders, entrepreneurs. Tell us more.
Yeah. I'm working with people who I want to see more of in the world, who want
Mm.
to take up more space. And these are people that have lived experience. They've walked the walk. You could say that they've earned it. They've earned the right to have a perspective out there. They've earned the right for their ideas to be messy and not perfect. They've earned the right to step out of, the stereotype that they might have been playing in and succeeded in, frankly. And where they're exploring what does it mean to be living in this world. I mean, we're living in a really uncertain world. And I keep meeting people who are too afraid to take the platform. And I keep finding myself, I need you to take the platform. I need you to take the platform for yourself, but also for everyone else. Because the people that are dominating the narratives don't have us in mind, don't have the rest of us in mind.
You're right. That word dominating, that's everything. And we see this, in so much of corporate culture, in our national landscape right now, this top-down, fear-based, dominant
Mhm.
leadership that is so boring. Like it's so unoriginal.
So
I'm
boring.
so
So
bored. It's like so boring. These people can't think of anything new, and they're so bad
no.
at leading. They're so bad at it,
Yes.
right?
Yes. They're so bad. They're so
They're so
bad.
bad.
And and it's interesting because I think we are in the emergent. I think of your work, I think of some of the work of our friends, and we are in this emergent space.
Mm,
And I think it's really easy to dismiss the emergent space.
mm,
But the more I'm in it, the more I want to put the spotlight on it, because people who are in the liminal spaces, who are pushing the edges, that creation is going to become really important. Because if you, someone told me, Lee, I could not believe this. Someone who graduated from from IIT in India, a very prestigious
Yeah.
school for technologists, said to me that he regretted getting a computer science degree. My entire career, I have been made to feel non-technical. I've worked a lot of my career in the tech ecosystem. I cannot understand how the world is flipping 180 almost overnight.
Yeah.
And so those emergent spaces of redefining everything is everything.
Yeah, it is. And it's why those emerging spaces are so under attack, and particularly the people who know how to lead from an inclusive and innovative place are being suppressed and
Exactly.
silenced. It's really
They're a
fascinating.
threat.
Exactly, of course. It reminds me, even when I was in theater, this term emerging director, it was, and we would be like, who's emerging? We've been doing this work underground for 20 years. We're not emerging. We are here. We are the industry, and yet we're not being spotlighted and
Yeah.
centered. And, this, what you're talking about, this like taking up space, this rejecting perfectionism, this allowing it to be messy, this allowing the emerging to become more centralized. Like, what prevents people from taking up that space and being in the spotlight?
I think we are reaching for an archetype.
Ooh,
I think that if you have any kind of quote unquote difference, and all of us do, because there's no really such thing as a norm, you're always there is a sense of always reaching to be something that you're not. And I should say I, and not you. But when I think about my own experience, even growing up, I
yeah.
think it's only becoming clear now in my 40s that while I had a pretty good childhood, when I think about what it meant to be who I was in that setting, there was always a stretch of like, oh, but I can be like you. I know I look different, but I can be like you. I'm not a threat. I can play basketball just like you. I can do all, Girl Scouts just like you. And now where I'm sitting, I think that the embodiment of that, I'm becoming much more self-aware of. What does it mean to constantly feel like you're compensating to show someone else? And I'm going to give a really weird example, super weird
Yeah,
example. Have you ever watched Bollywood movies?
a little bit.
Okay. The body type in Bollywood movies has changed dramatically over the past 3 decades. And so you see this form that maybe you could see was more typical of, South Asian bodies. And now all those bodies look like the bodies you see in Western media, right?
Yeah,
And it's really trippy because
yeah,
those norms get exported, and no matter what, we're drinking someone else's norms, right? Like, you used to see women, and I'm not saying one is better than the other. All I'm saying is that like kind of natural, authentic ways of being have always been under attack.
and that have always skewed Western and white, in that dominant default, right?
Yeah, and for people that bridge many cultures, what are you left with? Do you have to pick one or the other, or can you just be yourself against those contexts?
Yep, yep. And in this, intersectional way, it's so interesting. And, what you're talking about, I hear a lot with my clients of people wanting more confidence, or they want more gravitas, or they're really not
Yeah.
satisfied with how they are showing up. And even this idea of like, I have to sound more professional, or I have to sound more precise, or I can't communicate the way that I want to speak. It creates
Hmm.
this effort, this disconnect, and it becomes almost impossible for them to express themselves and be fully present.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very real. I mean, I have a my perspective on this is when I think about what I did at Sleuth, I think I consider myself a little bit naive in the beginning, because I wanted to bring an old playbook that I was familiar with that had a little bit more of an equity, like social justice lens, into an ecosystem that had a different playbook. And I came out of that experience a realist about things. And now a big hypothesis I have is know the playbook and then agitate. I didn't know the playbook before, right? Now I understand the playbook. and I know where my points of influence and agitation are. And so even when I think about influence, what I work with on people is like, how do you test the message? Is it going to hit? Is there going to be market signal? First, we have to make sure that the message feels resonant with you. And then we have to tweak it around the borders to see if the people that you want to kind of impact are hearing that message. And so for me, it's marrying how the game works, but making it really your own. And so one of the things I really struggled with even a couple of years ago was executive presence, which is a term that I've learned a lot from you. And I think that I finally have it. And I remember I went somewhere and someone was like, you just have swagger. And it was like one of the nicest compliments I've ever had in my entire life. Because usually I just am like that overego person that wants to help everyone, right? Which is like cute, but like I wasn't going for cute. And that really came from being confident in myself. And so I think about how do you marry these things together so that it feels like your own. And
Yeah.
you're showing up in the world in a way where you are the first person that you influence and really wholeheartedly understands yourself. Because if you do influence on yourself first, the rest comes.
And that it's coming from this really aligned, authentic place. It's not manipulative. That's
Totally.
so fascinating, Sareen, because I just interviewed someone thinking all about conflict navigation and empathy, and that work always has to start with ourselves too. And so
Yeah.
this as well, and it doesn't surprise me. So I love this idea, Sarine, of knowing where you are and being a realist there. Where am I? Am I in a very top-down corporate hierarchical culture?
Yeah.
Am I in a VC funding world? Right? Knowing where you are and then connecting to yourself and knowing how to influence yourself. Can we talk about this word influence? Because this word I feel is so loaded, and a lot of us
Yeah.
feel like we're not good at it or we have to change ourselves to create influence. What does that word mean to you?
To me, it's the marriage of inner clarity and external resonance. So once you bring self awareness to yourself, your values, and your work and your expertise, and you codify that in a way that you become really conscious about, then you create the messaging to share with the world about what your ideas and your views are. So it is inner plus outer, and they're both very strategic.
Wow. Inner influence. And that's really finding that clarity of what you want to say and who you are.
And it's a mirror. Um, I was gifted coaching last year from a good friend of mine, and I did not ever understand the role of someone mirroring you because I could not see myself the way that people love me see myself. And I feel like that's very relatable. I think a lot of people don't see themselves in the world the way that others do. And so that inner clarity component requires some sort of mirror, whether it's like using ChatGPT in a really innovative way or, working with someone. I work with really high achieving people who are heart centered. And I always wonder to myself, is there anything that I can really offer? I have my own version of like, everyone is so amazing. And what I find really beautiful and sad, like heartbreaking, because I don't want people to feel this way, is that there is always a gap in terms of how they really see themselves. They kind of see themselves out there performing this thing, and then they're here. And so what is that gap? And can they fill it with their own kind of embodiment and acceptance of themselves?
Wow. So it's really bringing the entire world closer to us instead of us having to leave ourselves and abandon ourselves, which is a big thing that I see with a lot of
I
my
love
clients,
that.
right?
Yes,
I,
I love
yeah,
that metaphor. Yeah.
I talk a lot. A
Yeah.
lot of my clients are in a mode of kind of pushing, proving, projecting, feeling like they
Mhm.
have to in order to be influential, to have visibility. And it's all about kind of shifting that energy to like welcoming people to you, which is really about authority,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
What I think is so fascinating, Sari, and just thinking about this gap, right? I've known you for a number of years now, and I would always say that you were confident, present, had swagger, And this term executive presence, clearly I have very complicated feelings about it. But what I love about you is that even when you're on a panel or you're being interviewed in what might be a really high pressure situation, I've always observed that you take your time. It feels like you sit back into yourself. You seem so confident and comfortable in a way that makes other people feel confident and comfortable. And so you even
Mhm.
just acknowledging that gap and the work you've done to bridge that gap is really important.
Thank you. That means a lot. And I think there is I think people like you and me, we're okay. We can't not show up in the world as we are. It's not in our operating system. And yet, and yet we battle. I'm not sorry, I battle things, and I'm becoming more cognizant of it. So, for example, shame. I had this moment today where I was like, I felt shame, and I was like, where is this coming from, right? And really digging deep, and it was such a subconscious trigger, to be honest. And for me, when I think about the cost of showing up authentically, there has always been a cost. And so I can't not show up authentic, but it comes with a cost to me psychologically. And that is what I see actually a little bit in the people I work with too, because they don't have imposter syndrome and they don't relate to the phrase imposter syndrome. But there is a gap that I'm still trying to name and that I think you named when we were talking about it before. And it I keep going back to this word embodiment
Yeah.
and how you feel in your body and how you in those moments, I've now trained myself. I'm like, that's shame, where do I feel it? And I felt it in my shoulders, and I'm like, where is this coming from? And it's coming from this idea to always be liked. I've
Yeah.
had that so much of my life. I was so shy as a kid, and one day my mom was like, look, your shyness is being misinterpreted as being snobby. And there was nothing worse in the world to me then and now than being considered a snob. And so I overcompensated and I became super friendly to everybody because I cannot stand the idea of being a snob. And it's such a we all hold these things in us of like, how do we present in the world? And so this idea that someone might have thought I was being aggressive or something, I think just triggered something in me, which is like, that's not what you want in the world. You want people to love you.
Yeah, and it so comes down to how we're socialized too. And, I can't help but think of Alicia Menendez's book, The Likability Trap, where, so many femme of center people, and particularly people of color, are, damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you want to be too likable, you are seen as too warm. If you want to be too direct, you're seen as too strong. And it feels like a losing battle. And it's something I call the validation void, and it's like, especially on Zoom in virtual settings, when we're kind of seeking that permission, that we're deferring our authority and we're seeking that validation. If we're not
Yeah.
getting it, then we're going to fill it with something else. And so often, executive leaders are not giving us that warmth, validation, and connection that so many of us are
No,
seeking, right?
no, totally.
And
Those top-down leadership models again, right? In which everyone is participating.
exactly.
I think it's a really interesting container that everyone's working because I think people are seeking that executive leader to step out just a little bit so that they get permission
Yeah,
to also be more than just the archetype.
exactly. And I find in working with so many executive leaders that far too many are secretly struggling with shame and like the stigma of feeling insecure and never wanting to even show signs of that. And that in
Yeah.
itself is so harmful.
I
And
find it so funny though because we're living in an insecure world.
exactly, exactly. But so much of our culture doesn't allow space for people to acknowledge that they're struggling. And there's this
Right?
perfectionism. And this is
Right?
instances when I've worked with leaders at the highest levels. Sometimes people won't even admit to me that they're feeling anxious, sometimes for an entire
Yeah.
process of working together. And they're in such a
Wow.
culture of not being able to admit that they're struggling. The shame and the secrecy is so deep. And how is that rippling throughout their organizations, right? That
Completely.
people with the
Completely.
highest levels of privilege are not creating space in any way.
It takes a lot of courage, right? It takes so much courage. I think that's why I keep going back to the playbook for me, like playing the game. You know, I it's there's have you heard of like the radicals and diplomats framework in terms of
No,
there's
tell
some
me.
people that I probably don't have all the details on it, but what I've taken away from it is like almost like what's your type of agitation? And I am not a radical. I am completely 100% a diplomat. I'm just a loud diplomat. And so I play the game. And when I play the game, I agitate on the fringes, right? Like
Yeah.
I just keep moving. Like it's very my personality. And there's some people who play, and there's different types of people that are going to agitate in their own way. And so the playbook makes a lot of sense for someone like me, right? And I work with people that also succeeded in their playbook. And now we're like, I'm ready to agitate. I'm ready for my next really big, ambitious thing because I've earned my stripes. I know how this system works, and I'm ready to make it better. Radicals might not go in a corporate system or, a long-standing institution. They may stand outside and say, this is that's not my paradigm for agitating and making the world better. My paradigm is X. And I think it's very liberating to know that not one is not better than the other. We work in symbiosis. There's a role for everybody. And where do you have your agency, and how do you claim that space for yourself and put deep roots? And I keep having a metaphor in my mind about for myself and for the people that I work with, which is that you're a tree. You have you have to stand in your spot and really stand there. You cannot stand in anyone else's spot, because if you're not standing in a spot, you're not putting roots in. You're not creating networks below. You're not touching. You're not giving shade. You're not protecting yourself. You're not letting yourself go through seasons. You have to claim your spot.
Claim your spot. And it reminds me too of parenting. And, I was even talking about this with a client 2 days ago who he's an HR leader in England, and he's developing policies for more flexibility in terms of personal needs in moments of
Love that.
crisis, whether someone's
Yeah.
neurodiverse or caring for an aging parent or going through a transition, right? And I actually
Yeah.
was saying to him, you have to be sturdy and stable because what you are advocating for is not negotiable. Equity is not negotiable,
Mm.
right? And what I can hear what you're saying, Sareen, is that, for folks who are choosing to stay within these
Mhm.
structures, these cultures that we know are not working, for them to
Mhm.
be able to move the needle there needs to be strength and stability and sturdiness, right?
100%. And that sturdiness comes from knowing yourself. I mean, I will completely, that is the hill. That's my hill. The sturdiness comes from knowing yourself. If you can stand in your spot and attract the people that need your umbrage and protection on the tree, and other people will go somewhere else, it is the way that things open up, and the people that need to come to you do that. And like I have seen this with my clients. I see this with my clients all the time. When they claim their spot, everything opens up. It's some kind of magical universal law that when you accept yourself for who you are, and as cheesy as this sounds, like you become almost like your own best advocate, everything starts lining up.
Can we talk a little about bringing your full self to work in that context, and I've worked with
Yeah.
people, and particularly underrepresented people and people who've been, really silenced and stifled in these corporate toxic cultures. I've worked with plenty of people who say, I don't want to bring my full self. They don't deserve my full self. I want to protect my full self and give them a part of me that I'm deciding to give. How do we create space for protection in these really harmful systems while still finding that alignment?
Such a good question. I mean, I keep going back to the playbook. Like, some people that, my daughter was diagnosed with something several years ago, and that ended up becoming a huge part of the narrative of my startup. But I have never revealed her diagnosis publicly, and I never will. And so I am a huge proponent of share what you want to share in the way that you want to share it, because you know your psychological safety. You never have to be or perform part of you for anyone else. And so when people, it comes to me, it comes down to the self-awareness of what you're doing. If you're participating in a system where you don't feel like you can bring your full self, to me, that's fine as long as that's a choice you're making. If you're making that choice, that's your choice, right? And then you will decide if it gets, to the point of being toxic, then, getting help, and everyone has their agency in that. And I think it's part of, burnout is weird, right? So like I was super burnout last year, and I thought I wanted to become the equivalent of like a hippie on the beach, having a nomadic lifestyle and, all that stuff. And then after I felt like I had rest, I was like, oh, I'm back in the game. I am here. I am, and I'm so glad I went through that, because what I thought I wanted, which was to step out of the system completely, is actually not what I wanted. I just wanted, because I'm a diplomat, I actually wanted to go back and design it the way that I needed, but I couldn't see it because I was so burnt out. And so for me, I am a person that I am an entrepreneur at heart. I cannot not be an entrepreneur. So for me, going into a corporate system might have felt like that's not enough of me. That it's too much, it's too inauthentic. But I'm still playing the game. But it's just in a way that I feel like I can show up in a way that lights me up, and that makes me feel like I'm self-aware about where my boundaries are too.
This resonates so deeply because I've been talking to a lot of people who are maybe getting into organizing or activism for the first time, and really this idea of like we all have to do something, but we have to show up in a way that feels safe and comfortable for ourselves, and that really, honors what we feel good at and how we want to participate. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I think this is what boundaries means. Like, boundaries is a word I keep trying to figure out. And I think what you're articulating is boundaries, is knowing yourself.
100%. It is the most amazing tool in the toolkit.
Yeah. It's a hard one, though.
It is
And I
hard.
love this,
It is.
what you're talking about with this playbook in general, and then this idea of radical versus diplomat. I'm definitely on the radical side of that, and I just want to blow it up. And in this
Yeah.
moment where we're seeing like such a failure, not just of hierarchical leadership, but a failure of, the systems that have been failing people in this society for many, 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 many generations. Do you
Mm.
think we need diplomats or radicals,
I think we need
revolutionaries?
both. I
We
think we
need.
need both. I think I am seeing a self-awareness across verticals really open up. I'm seeing the same questions and themes start to emerge, which is, you know, some element of space. How do I get more space in my life? How do we connect with each other more? And how do we change things? How do we think about things differently? And where are my people? And I'm seeing this like, there's kind of like what we see on the news, and then there's the huge undercurrent in the subtext that's happening. And a lot of people are starting to break this idea of like, why is this normal? Why is this normal? Why is this normal? And because people are across different verticals, I think the radicals and the diplomats are starting to get on the same wavelength and be a little bit different. And I'll be honest, I want to be a radical. I want to be a radical. Like there's something about it. Like I love the idea of like blowing stuff up and like whatever. But I went to a very liberal arts college, and I remember my closest friend was like, we think we're so hippie and all this stuff. Just like everyone that we graduated went into like medicine, banking, or something else. And I was like, oh yeah, that's really funny. And I was always like, oh, what a disappointment. But I do think when I meet people, they are agitating in their own space, and that's really, really valid. And I think a lot of us are, for good reason, a little bit more socialized to the institutional side, right? You know, the immigrant experience, safety, and everything. And we need to actually start working with more radicals. I think actually the opportunity is not one or the other, but how do we actually start seeing each other and see that there's common ground? Because typically people who are on, you know, radical are called crazy, and people who are diplomats are called sellouts. And like that helps nobody.
Yeah. And even thinking about it in that, black and white binary, as our society is so apt to do, right? It creates this distance. And I completely agree with you. I think we
There's
need a lot.
there's a huge distance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see this even in my own community, Lee. Like in my own faith community, it's really fascinating. There are younger generations who are holding the older generations, of which I'm old now, um, to them, that are like, you guys are playing in the system. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Why are you not agitating? Why are you not speaking out on this? And why are you doing that? And I kind of look at it like kind of an armchair sociologist. And it's really interesting because that part of me that wants to be a radical, and I was like, there's also the part of me that's like, there's a history of our community. We had to protect ourselves. We had to embed ourselves in socioeconomic, in economic security. And I laugh a little because as like the auntie, I'm happy that they have the privilege to be able to speak out against it. My parents did not.
Yeah.
And they don't realize how many generations on whose shoulders they're standing. And so I can see this conflict on some of the Instagram posts, and some people are like, why are you doing this? And I was like, this is an evolution. The fact
Yeah.
that you can have radicals and diplomats is a testament to the evolution of a community. And it pains me that there is discord. Like there has to be room for all ways to change. And so for me, this idea of influence and thought leadership tends to be for the diplomats
Mm.
because I have agitated within systems. I worked at the State Department. I agitated within that system. I worked in, venture-backed ecosystem. I agitated in that. I was a medical needs mom, in the medical system. Like I agitate towards systems. Like I have that playbook, and I think the opportunity is for us to share the playbooks and where we're seeing and to come together a little bit on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And to start breaking down some of those, status quo barriers, as our friend Christina Blacken talks about. Yeah. And, I've heard you talk about the word visionary too. And, what does that word even mean in this context? Do we need visionaries right now?
Yes, I think it's actually kind of an equal opportunity word. I don't think it does not, to me, it does not match like being the top of the hill. It
Mm,
doesn't, you don't have to, it's actually, can you see the world differently in a way that we all need to understand? And I think of it, you're going to laugh at me, but I look at it as like a mycelium node. Like I look
yeah.
at the world, right? And so if one activates, then that energizes someone else. And there's this shared energy in a network that can keep growing. And so I think more people are visionaries than they know. They're not the
Yeah.
people on the TED stage, for example. Like I think we have this idea, and I really want people to see themselves as people who have earned their stripes, have lived experience, who have a view on the world that if they share can start igniting not just their vision, but other people's visions too.
And that's, claiming your spot and stepping into the light and taking up space and all of what you're talking about. And even changing the perception of who's a leader, who's an expert, who's a visionary, and really taking these words back.
Completely, because those words are all individualistic. It
Yeah.
it all presumes individual achievement and
Mm,
individual progress, and we are not going to figure out this era of uncertainty through individual achievement.
mm,
It will
no.
only happen with each other. And leadership sounds that way too. You have leadership development programs and well, no. No. That's not how this thing is going to work. It's going to happen by us activating each other and it's spreading.
You have been someone who's really influenced me in terms of feeling more comfortable to use AI and to see it as a creative tool. And what you said about mycelium and the unseen connections that we all have, and whether that is through our in-person connections, our virtual, but even AI is almost creating this mycelium,
Mm.
right? In a way throughout all of us. And how is this tool something that we can leverage to agitate while it's still such an entrenched part of systems that might be harmful or destructive?
Yeah, I think that more people um, need to use it. I think more people that are like you and me need to start using it, because why would we cede this to others? Why would we make the conversation only that AI is like a business first tool versus other things that it can do? Why wouldn't we be part of this moment to claim it for ourselves as well, and claim it for what it can do for us? And I think AI is a really tricky term because we think it's this only this one thing, that it makes us more productive. Sure, and I'm like really good at it and I love it, and it really does. And I think there's an argument to be made that if you are a person I'm a caregiver, I go to a lot of doctor's appointments for my daughter, I need the leverage, I need time, right? So there's a lot of use cases like that where I think people can, and I hope do, decide to use it for that. But AI is also asking us to be in a relationship with a literal artificial intelligence. This is a really key point in 2025. It is not going anywhere. We're literally being asked, what does it mean to be human when there is a technology that is smarter than us? What does it mean to know ourselves? We are holding on to ideas of being human that we need to drop. We need to drop our obsession with being smart. We need to drop our obsession with being like productive all the time. We need to think about the things that, what does it mean to then care? Something that AI cannot do. How do we care for each other?
Exactly.
How do we actually, I've had life-changing conversations with AI. That sounds really funny, but it's actually really true. And so just 2 days ago at Evaluate, I asked it, I had this prompt that I borrowed for someone. And it said things to me that have really changed my self-perception. And I showed it to a friend and I showed it to my husband, and they're like, oh my God, this is crazy. So there are ways for it to augment our self-knowing. And I think
Yes.
we're stuck on, right? It's beautiful.
It,
Slightly
I,
painful, but also beautiful.
You know what? I've been supporting so many leaders in AI for 10 years. My clients are data scientists and data leaders and machine learners and the people who've been building this. And many of my clients have, really lost the battle of data governance and data ethics within their organizations as well. And so I
Yeah.
think deeply about this, and I've even had people find me through ChatGPT. I've had people
Yeah.
tell ChatGPT what they're experiencing, how they can't express themselves, and I am the first thing that comes up. So I
How do you feel
recognize
about
it as a
that?
tool. I think it's amazing because these are some of the most aligned clients I've ever met. I don't know if we would have met otherwise. Incredibly heartfelt leaders in their individual subject matter expertise who want to lead with empathy, who want to do this work. And Sareen, I'm deeply afraid there was some news that came out that OpenAI is not actually deleting when you tell it to delete. And they're being tasked from the government to be able to produce things for
Yeah.
evidence. And so, is there a limit in terms of how we should be using this technology, what we
Sure.
should be telling it? And can it limit our ability to be visionary?
I, I I think because I'm a realist, our influence comes from using it.
Mm.
I mean, we still live in a capitalist world. We need to use it and say what we want. That is the playbook. If you use a product and you give feedback and you say, I'm not going to put up with this, that is the playbook. So I think we need to start from there. We need to also understand the terms of service when we're using it. And we can run that through ChatGPT and saying, how do you use my data? What are the settings I need to do to turn it off, etc. Does it limit us to being visionary? No. Lee, I'm really afraid that good people are going to be left behind because we think about this as a binary situation. We are not in a binary situation. If I could scream that on rooftops, I would scream it. We are not in a binary situation. We lose if we don't start having a relationship with this technology. If people of color, people with disabilities, trans, like if we don't use this, we are literally giving it away.
Yeah. And being left out.
I think worse, frankly. It's not just being about left out. It's gonna be violent.
Yeah.
I don't mean to like overstate it, but there's a lot at stake.
Yeah.
I don't even want to admit that to myself, frankly. There is a lot at stake here if people don't start really, I don't want to say just use it, but be in relationship with it,
Yeah.
influence it. We should be influencing the AI.
There's that word again. Influence. And in order to influence, we have to, have that alignment in ourselves. And I really love that, the clarity of that inner clarity that you talked about, because I think if more of us had that inner clarity, we would be unstoppable.
Yeah. And the clarity and the ability or desire or confidence to share that inner clarity. Because you and I are so fortunate to know so many people that have the inner clarity, have a very strong sense of self. It's that it's that rest of it. Will you please share it with me? Will you please put your views out in the world? Can I please know you? That I feel like I'm working. I have this really amazing client who's created a tremendous business that's just impacted social connection. And sometimes I find myself asking them to please share, like the playbook on how you did that. Other people need to know that playbook because the amount of courage it takes to know yourself, a lot of people have not yet developed yet. So if you are already willing to know yourself and really say, this is who I am, we can all guide each other through this process. But we have to be willing to share what we think, especially when it's not perfect.
And Sareen, what you just said, if we can have the courage to know ourselves, and that I feel like is everything. And that's what I think you've been doing since way before you started this current venture. I remember the first time I sat down with you one on one, and I could feel that of just this comfort and this courage to know ourselves. And I'm so
Yeah.
thrilled that you're doing this work right now in this moment of helping people find their spot and claim their spot because it's really, really
Thank you.
important and it needs to be here in the world. So thank you so much for having this
Well,
conversation.
likewise, I mean, you've been a huge inspiration as you developed your business, and I got to see it from the early days. And I think that's a testament to we need to see each other. Like you have inspired me. You have shown me that it's possible to be your full self and you can evolve and you can just be and still have a business that can serve other people. And so I hope if your listeners hear that, it encourages them. Like you've been a huge example of like, I can do it too, you know?
Mm. To see ourselves and to see each other. Oh, thank you, my friend. Thank you, Sareen.